officers. The legislation is important, but cultural change is harder to achieve. That's why we need to keep telling Rebecca's story. People need to understand the cost of corruption. The case also influenced international law enforcement cooperation. Mexican authorities had been embarrassed by their failure to extradite Morales quickly, leading to reforms in their extradition procedures. The Hartwell case became a symbol of cross-border cooperation, Marshall explained. It showed that corruption investigations can't be limited by jurisdictional boundaries. What about other international connections? We're investigating whether the network had connections to cartels in Colombia and other countries. The financial flows suggest international involvement. Chen was promoted to lieutenant and assigned to head a new anti-corruption unit within the Phoenix Police Department. Her first priority was implementing new procedures based on lessons learned from the Hartwell case. We're going to investigate every complaint of corruption aggressively, Chen told her team. No complaint is too small to investigate. What about complaints against supervisors? Especially complaints against supervisors.
Okay, the networks are down, the equipment...
The new unit investigated over 200 complaints in its first year, leading to 12 criminal charges and 37 disciplinary actions. The message was clear. Corruption would not be tolerated. The success of the Phoenix Anti-Corruption Unit led to similar programs in other departments. The FBI provided training and resources to help departments implement their own programs. The Hartwell case created a model for fighting corruption, Marshall said. Departments across the country are using our methods. What's the most important element? Protecting the people who report corruption. If officers don't feel safe reporting wrongdoing, the system fails. The case continued to generate academic interest. Criminal justice researchers studied the network's operations, the investigation methods, and the policy implications. The Hartwell case is a perfect example of how corruption can be systematic rather than isolated, Professor Williams from Arizona State University explained. It shows the importance of looking at patterns rather than individual incidents. What about prevention? The key is creating systems that make corruption difficult and risky. Regular audits, rotation of assignments, and strong oversight are essential. Chen often lectured at the university about the case. She emphasized the human cost of corruption and the importance of ethical leadership. Rebecca Hartwell died because she believed in justice, Chen told students. Every person in the criminal justice system has a responsibility to uphold their legacy. 5 years after the convictions, the Rebecca Hartwell case continued to influence law enforcement practices across the United States. The FBI established a permanent task force dedicated to investigating systemic corruption in law enforcement. Agent Marshall, now Assistant Director of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division, oversaw the expansion of anti-corruption efforts nationwide. The task force used methods developed during the Hartwell investigation to identify and prosecute corrupt officials. We've learned that corruption networks share common characteristics, Marshall explained to a conference of police chiefs. They operate like criminal organizations, with hierarchies, territories, and systematic methods. How do we identify these networks? Financial analysis is key. Corrupt officials leave financial footprints that we can follow. We also look for patterns in case outcomes and unusual relationships between law enforcement and criminal organizations. The task force has investigated over 50 corruption cases since its establishment, leading to hundreds of arrests and significant reforms in law enforcement practices. Chen, now a captain with the Phoenix Police Department, had become a national expert on corruption investigation. She consulted with departments across the country on implementing anti-corruption programs. The most important lesson from the Hartwell case is that corruption is a systemic problem, not just individual misconduct, Chen told the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We need systematic solutions. What kind of systematic solutions? Regular audits of case outcomes, rotation of assignments to prevent long-term relationships with criminal organizations, and strong protection for whistleblowers. How do we change the culture that protects corrupt officers? Leadership is crucial. Chiefs and supervisors need to make it clear that corruption will not be tolerated, and that officers who report corruption are heroes, not traitors. The Rebecca Hartwell Foundation had grown into a significant organization providing support for families of murdered law enforcement officers. David Hartwell had left teaching to run the foundation full-time. We've helped over 300 families deal with the murder of a law enforcement family member, David reported. Foundation's work influenced policy. We've advocated for better death benefits for law enforcement families and improved investigation procedures for officer murders. The Foundation had also established scholarship programs for children of murdered law enforcement officers. Rebecca's nephew, David's son, was one of the first recipients. Rebecca would be proud that her death is helping other families, David said. She always cared about helping people. The case had also influenced international law enforcement cooperation. The Organization of American States had established protocols for investigating cross-border corruption based on the Hartwell case. The Hartwell case demonstrated that corruption networks often operate across international boundaries, explained Ambassador Rodriguez, the OAS representative. We need international cooperation to fight them effectively. What specific protocols were established? Information sharing agreements, joint investigation procedures, and coordinated enforcement actions. We've already had success in several cases. The academic study of the case continued to generate new insights. Criminologists had identified the Hartwell case as a turning point in understanding law enforcement corruption. The case changed how we think about corruption, Professor Williams explained. Instead of viewing it as individual misconduct, we now understand it as organizational behavior. What are the implications for training? We need to train officers to recognize and report systemic corruption, not just individual misconduct. The signs
Hey, how can I help?
different responses. The case had also influenced popular culture.
I'm a busy woman, okay?
The case had won several awards and brought national attention to the problem of law enforcement corruption. The show has been valuable for educating the public about corruption, Chen said. People need to understand how these networks operate. Has the media attention been helpful? Overall, yes.
Merriweather, for all your private security needs. How can I help?
Corrupt officials to operate.
A helicopter has been dispatched.
A worker who had found Rebecca's uniform had become an advocate for civilian involvement in law enforcement oversight. He served on Phoenix's Civilian Review Board. Citizens have a responsibility to support honest law enforcement, Santos told a community meeting. When we see something wrong, we need to report it. What about people who are afraid of retaliation? That's why we need strong protection for people who report corruption. The system only works if people feel safe coming forward. The mine shaft where Rebecca's body was found had been converted into a memorial park. The Rebecca Hartwell Memorial Park included a visitor center with exhibits about corruption in law enforcement. The memorial serves as a reminder of the cost of corruption, Chen said at the park's dedication ceremony. Rebecca died fighting for justice, and we need to continue her fight. The park attracted visitors from across the country, including law enforcement officers, students, and families.
I need directions, not a mind reader.
It had become a pilgrimage site for people committed to police reform. The case had also influenced federal law enforcement hiring practices. The FBI, DEA,
I really enjoy talking to you.
New background check procedures designed to identify potential corruption risks. We're looking more carefully at financial histories, personal relationships, and previous law enforcement experience, explained FBI Director Thompson. The Hartwell case taught us that corrupt officers often have warning signs. What about current employees? We've implemented regular polygraph examinations and financial audits for employees in sensitive positions.
Hope you're having fun.
Prevention is better
Almost
than
there.
investigation.
Get ready to exit the helicopter.
Inspired by the case had been
There.
adopted by
Enjoy.
most states. The Rebecca Hartwell Act had been expanded to include state and local law enforcement, providing federal protection for all law enforcement whistleblowers. The legislation has made a real difference, explained Senator Martinez, who had sponsored the federal bill. Reports of corruption have increased significantly
Can you hurry
since
up?
the law was passed. What about retaliation? We've prosecuted several cases of retaliation against whistleblowers. The law has teeth, and we're using them. The case had also influenced international law enforcement training. The FBI's International Training Academy now included courses on corruption investigation based on the Hartwell case. We're teaching law enforcement officers from around the world about recognizing and investigating corruption, explained Academy Director Johnson. The techniques developed in the Hartwell case are applicable anywhere. What's the international response? Very positive. Countries are eager to learn from our experience. Corruption is a global problem that requires global solutions. 10 years after Rebecca's murder was solved, Chen reflected on the case's impact. The investigation had changed her life, her department, and law enforcement across the country. Rebecca's death was a tragedy, but it led to reforms that have protected countless other officers, Chen said. Her sacrifice wasn't in vain. What still needs to be done? We need to remain vigilant. Corruption networks are adaptive and resilient. They'll find new ways to operate if we're not careful. What about the future? We need to continue educating officers about the dangers